Hello, my name is Mirabelle Turner and I'm back with the best charts of next week according to traditional astrology. I've picked out the best moments of the next 7 days, which you can use to boost the chances of success with whatever you're doing or whatever you're initiating during that time. Electional astrology is based on the principle that the positions of the planets in the sky are correlated with the events that happen on Earth. So if we pick a time when the planets are configured in a positive manner, then that tells us that the events happening on Earth at the same time should also go positively and have a good outcome. All right, so let's talk about the general astrological weather of next week. Let's talk about some of the positive aspects that we want to emphasize in our electional charts for the next 7 days. So the first thing is that a sextile between the Sun in Taurus and Jupiter exalted in Cancer will be forming in the sky. Now, Jupiter and the Sun are both of the diurnal sect in astrology. That means they're both in the quote-unquote day team among the planets. And the Sun represents our willpower, identity, leadership, and visibility, while Jupiter represents wisdom, hope, faith, and optimism. So it's easy to see how the principles of these two planets uplift and support one another, especially when they're in a friendly sextile aspect. So that's definitely one thing that we want to emphasize. And the second thing is there will be a mutual reception between Mercury in Taurus and Venus in Gemini. A mutual reception means that these two planets will be hanging out in each other's signs. It's like if you went to stay at your friend's house while they were staying at your place, you might not have access to your own things and your own resources, but given that you and your friend are staying at each other's place, you are motivated to work together and let each other use each other's things in constructive ways. So it's a great time to do things that combine the significations of Mercury, such as communication, and Venus, which relates to art and relationships, among other topics. And there'll be a few nice moon aspects this week as well, as we come off the full moon in Scorpio and move towards a new moon in Taurus later in the month. Now, there are also some challenging things that we want to work around next week. The first challenging thing we need to work around is the fact that early in the week, Mars will be making an exact overcoming square to Jupiter. So Mars in Aries, which will be at around 19 degrees, 20 degrees, and Jupiter at 19 degrees of Cancer will be in a tense square aspect to one another. And with Mars being in Aries, which is the earlier zodiac sign, it will be in the more dominant or powerful position. And this means that through aggression, violence, disruption, and impatience, Mars is going to disturb and get in the way of what Jupiter is trying to expand and uplift in the sign of Cancer. I don't want to emphasize that aspect if we can avoid it. The second thing is that Mercury, now it's moved into the sign of Taurus, will early in the week be making a square to Pluto in Aquarius. And this is going to be made louder by the fact that Pluto will be stationing in Aquarius around the same time. Now, whenever a planet stations, either direct or retrograde, it makes its significations much louder and more apparent. So early in the week, we can expect Mercury, which receives and transmits information, to discover or receive some very unsettling, disturbing news to do with dark underworld power dynamics. So that's something we also want to avoid emphasizing in our electional charts. Now, let's go through the rising signs of next week to see which of the signs are usable and which ones we want to avoid. So let's start with sunrise, which is Taurus rising. Taurus rising is one of our usable rising signs for next week. This sign will be ruled by Venus in the second house of Gemini, and that mutual reception between Mercury in the first house and Venus in the second house will create a strong connection between you, the person taking action, and financial or resource-based topics. Gemini rising is potentially usable, but not the best rising sign we have next week, because the ruling planet, Mercury, which is in charge of guiding the election, will be placed in the 12th house, which traditional astrologers said was one of the most challenging houses because it's not configured to the ascendant. That means a planet there cannot see what's going on with the ascendant and cannot effectively guide the direction of the chart. So the 12th house is also a very inactive and dark place. So ideally, we don't want our ascendant ruler to be placed in this location, even though Gemini rising will have Venus, a benefic planet, placed angularly in the first house. Now, Cancer rising, the ruler will be the moon, so the condition will depend on which sign the moon is in, and that changes every 2 days. This rising sign does have Jupiter exalted in the first house, but we don't want to use it because Saturn and Mars, which are both malefic planets, are placed very prominently in the 10th house, suggesting that people who have authority or power over us will act aggressively or restrictively towards us and get in the way of what we're trying to achieve. Leo rising will also be one of the best rising signs of next week. It's ruled by the Sun in Taurus in the prominent and powerful 10th house, and this is a great chart for visibility and leadership in general. Virgo rising is also usable this week. It will be ruled by Mercury in Taurus. We want to wait until Mercury is past its square with Pluto. Otherwise, we're baking in those troubling messages that Mercury will receive into the chart and reducing the quality of our chart ruler. We do also need to consider that Mercury is under the beams and will go combust this week. That means Mercury will be very close to the Sun and basically hidden by the Sun's rays. And therefore, this means that it will be difficult to gain any visibility or outward success with mercurial topics this week. Libra rising is not usable, although it's ruled by Venus in the 9th house in Gemini, which is configured positively to the ascendant. Both malefics are in the 7th house, directly opposing what we're trying to achieve. We also don't want to use Scorpio rising, because the ruler, Mars in Aries, is placed in a dark house, the 6th house, which traditional astrologers said was the second most challenging house after the 12th. It's a dark place that weakens and confuses the planet and is difficult for it to guide the action that we're taking. And Mars is also co-present with that fallen Saturn in Aries, which makes its condition even worse. Sagittarius rising, although it's ruled by Jupiter, is also not an ideal rising sign because the ascendant ruler is placed in the 8th house, which also cannot see the ascendant. We want to skip over Capricorn and Aquarius rising because both these signs are ruled by Saturn, which is fallen in Aries. We want to avoid a planet that's in its fall, especially using it as our ascendant ruler, because without dignity, a planet can run into a lot of issues. Now, Saturn in Aries basically runs into the issue of trying to achieve Saturnian goals such as longevity, authority, and stability, but at the pace of Aries, i.e. moving very fast or at a young age. So basically trying to commit to things or gain positions of responsibility or taking very heavy decisions, but without the time, patience, discipline, and work over a long period of time that would make such things effective. And in general, Saturn is just very grumpy when it's in Aries because of the lack of dignity, which can make it lash out and act in a volatile or dangerous way. Pisces Pisces rising is usable this week. The ruler is Jupiter, which is placed in the 5th house, one of the best houses. But we just need to be aware that Jupiter will be overcome by Mars early in the week, and that will weaken its condition. And finally, we come to Aries rising, which we don't want to use because both malefics, Mars and Saturn, will be rising in the 1st house, which are an indicator that whatever we're trying to initiate will run into a lot of disruptions and roadblocks. Alright, so that's an overview of all 12 rising signs for next week. Alright, let's have a look at our first chart for next week. So it's going to be on Thursday, 7th of May, after some of those more difficult aspects have started to ease. And the chart will be around 10 degrees of Pisces rising and 3 a.m. in your location. So I've set the chart here for Los Angeles, California, but wherever you're based, if you adjust the chart to around 10 degrees of Pisces rising, you should get a chart that looks like this. And the planetary hour is the hour of Venus. And the planetary hour is also important when we're electing because that connects us to a planetary sphere. It kind of is like in chart, whichever planet is in charge at that time. And so ideally we want a benefic or luminary to be our ruler of our planetary hour, or a planet that is angular. And so here we have Venus angular in the 4th house, and I've gone for the hour of Venus. Now what's good about this chart is with Pisces rising, our ruler is Jupiter, which is a benefic, and it's placed in the 5th house of joy, creativity, art, dating, children, sexuality, and so on. So this chart will be good if you want to start a creative project, if you want to create a piece of art or music. Jupiter also represents teachers, and with the 5th house being related to children, you could use this chart if you're looking for a teacher for your child, or if you're looking for a music or art teacher for yourself. And with this chart, the rulers of the 1st and 7th houses, which respectively represent you and other parties, the rulers of these 2 houses are Mercury and Jupiter, which are in a positive sextile aspect to one another. So with that friendly relationship to one another, you can use this chart for any kind of activity that brings you and someone else into connection one-on-one. So if you want to call someone and have a conversation, if you wanted to write a letter to somebody, and with Jupiter in the 5th house, you could also use this time to set up a date or have a date with somebody as well. And it would make you and the other person sympathetic to each other's wishes and preferences. The moon in this chart is in Capricorn. Normally I wouldn't use an election where the moon is in Capricorn or Scorpio, because the moon lacks dignity in both of those signs. And in Capricorn, the moon doesn't have access to many resources, and it's in a weak and somewhat foreign position as well. And with the moon playing such an important role in manifesting the action that we're trying to bring about, that's generally a situation that we want to avoid. But this is really the first usable chart that we have so far, and if you really have something that you need to do on this day, then you could use this chart. And the fact that the moon is in a positive house and it's separating from a trine with the sun and applying very closely to oppose Jupiter kind of offset the negative factors about the sign that it's in. You really want to make sure that the moon is no later than 19 degrees in your location. If it is, you can use the same chart on the previous day, potentially, if the moon is applying to oppose Jupiter. And the reason for this is once the moon clears its aspect with Jupiter, it's very quickly going on to square Mars. And that's really going to damage the moon, which is our manifestor. And so we would not want to use the chart if that is the case. If the moon if the moon's next aspect is the square to Mars. Now, we also need to be aware that although Mars has separated from its square to Jupiter, it is still only 2 degrees away from that aspect. So you're still going to be able to feel that energy. And so you might be with Mars in the second house here, there might be some disruptions when it comes to finances, arguments when it comes to finances, which disrupts whatever you're trying to do creatively or romantically at this time. We do have a angular Venus in this chart, and so you could also use this positively for fourth house topics, which relate to your home and also your parents. So if you wanted to do a minor home clear out or aesthetic project like beautification of your home, or if you wanted to do something harmonious with your parents, you wanted to send them a conciliatory message, or if you just want to do something nice for your parents, would also be a good time, or kind of connected with your roots, looking into your ancestry, something like that would also work. All right, let's move on to our next chart. So our next chart is going to be around 6 a.m. on Saturday, May 9th. So you want to adjust the chart in your location until you get 18 degrees of Taurus rising, and that will give you a chart which looks like this. Now, what's nice about this chart is the mutual reception between Mercury in Taurus and Venus in Gemini is connecting the first and second houses in this chart. And Venus in Gemini is also the chart ruler. So this is creating a really strong rapport between you and your financial sphere. And so if you wanted to use this chart to launch a new revenue stream, a new way to make yourself money, the second house can also be to do with food. So if you wanted to try a new nutrition plan or healthy diet, that might also work as well. Or if you wanted to make a purchase or sell something at this time, that might be a good use of this chart. And what's nice is the 8th house, which is also a financial location in the chart, but has to do with other people's money or our investments. The ruler of that house is also good. It's Jupiter in Cancer. And I like that the ruler of the 2nd and 8th houses, which are Mercury and Jupiter, they're in sextile to one another. So if you have to do something financial relating to your finances and someone else's finances as well, if you're trading something, making an investment, setting up a joint bank account, or if you need to work on maybe something like a prenup agreement for a marriage, those could go well with this chart. And the sextile between the Sun and Jupiter is getting pretty close at this point. And so I really like that aspect, and it's connecting the Sun, which brings a lot of visibility and vitality to the first house, and then Jupiter in the 3rd house, which can do with communications. And so I think there are a lot of factors in this chart which make it great for communication-based actions, like something, writing a book, writing a speech, writing an article. We just have to be aware that Mercury is combust. So whatever we are communicating is really hard to be seen. So we have to be aware that this is not a good time to put what we have written or communicated out into the world and get visibility. But it's fine if we're working on it privately, or if we want to write something secret, send a private message, or something like that, because it is invisible behind the Sun. But yeah, some of the other factors that make this nice for communication are that, the Moon is in Aquarius, which is an air sign, and it's separating from a square with Mercury, and it's bringing Mercury's energy towards its next aspect, which is a trine with Venus in Aquarius. So it's passing the energy between those two planets, which is strengthening their relationship beyond that mutual reception. And I think that trine between two air signs, Aquarius and Gemini, gives this chart a very chatty, intellectual, and intelligent vibe. And then both the malefics in this chart, Mars and Saturn, are tucked away in the 12th house, which kind of neutralizes them and prevents them from interfering with what we're trying to achieve. One of the main downsides is that Saturn is the ruler of the Moon in this case, and normally we do want the Moon's ruler to be in good condition. So with with the charts that we have this week, the moon's ruler is always going to be that Saturn in Aries, and so that's not great. I want the moon's ruler to be in better condition, but hopefully the positive aspects about this election outweigh this negative. Now, our next chart is going to be on the same day, May 9th, but at 7:50 a.m. roughly in your location, which should give you 18 degrees of Gemini rising and the hour of Jupiter. So this chart is not as good as the previous one because the condition of the ascendant ruler is worse. The ascendant ruler is Mercury, which is placed in the 12th house, which traditional astrologers said was the most challenging house, and it's a dark house, and so as the chart ruler, it can't see the ascendant, it can't guide what we're doing. So this isn't the best chart of our selection, but what it highlights is that Venus in Gemini, and it's very prominent right on the degree of the ascendant. And Venus helps us to beautify things. So if you wanted to do something at this time to beautify yourself with a playful Gemini energy, like take some fun portraits of yourself, for example, this would be a good time to do it. And then you might also be able to use it for 12th house activities with the ascendant ruler there. So for example, if you want to start a meditation practice, look into a solo retreat, or do like a solitude practice of some kind, because the 12th house has to do with, exile and so on. And that will be supported by Jupiter in Cancer there in the second, which is funny because we've got another chart with a benefic in the second house. So this could also work for personal finances and income, but it's not good for investments because the 8th house is not as good. It's Capricorn ruled by Saturn in Aries. And then again, we've still got the moon in Aquarius, and it's applying to Venus in Gemini in the first house, which helps manifest its significations. All right, our next chart will be on the same day, May 9th, but at 3:06 p.m. So this chart, adjust it until you get around 22 degrees of Virgo rising, and we're aiming for the planetary hour of Jupiter. So this chart is ruled by Mercury and Taurus in the 9th house. So there's going to be a general draw towards activities like higher education, university, publishing, philosophy, politics, religion, and so on. But with Mercury combust, any of those things, to use it constructively, we'll need to do it in a private or secret way. It's not a time to publish something and get visibility, because we need to wait until Mercury is further away from the Sun to do that. The mutual reception Venus and Mercury has now moved to the 9th and 10th houses. So there is a strong relationship here between learning, beliefs, philosophy, and so on, and then career or public reputation. So if you wanted to do something communicatively or artistically to do with both of those topics, you could use this chart for that. And the moon in this chart is applying very closely to Venus, which helps to mitigate the fact that the moon is in the 6th house. Now, normally we don't want to put the moon in the 6th house, and this is one of the major downsides of this chart, because traditional astrologers said the 6th house was the second worst house, the second most difficult house, because it weakens and confuses planets there, and it's a dark house as well. So, however, if a planet is configured to another planet in the 10th house, or a degree in the or an angle, then it can make it more active and visible than it would be otherwise. So this chart is usable if you have to do something around this time. And, at this stage of the month, the moon is in the 3rd quarter phase, but it still has quite a lot of light and energy. And, it is a waning moon, which we tend to, traditionally is bring something to a close or wrap something up rather than start something new. So just be aware that the moon is in that phase of bringing its monthly cycle towards an end at this point. But it's not, but it still has a fair amount of light and energy to manifest what we're doing. And now we come to our final and very best chart of next week. And this is going to be on May 9th at around 11:45 a.m. in the morning. And you want to adjust the chart in your location to around 10 degrees of Leo rising. So this is the best chart of next week because the ascendant ruler, the sun, is placed prominently in the 10th house in the sign of Taurus. And this is better than the previous chart because the sun is not combust. So basically the condition of the ascendant ruler is better than the previous chart, and it's in the 10th, which is one of the strongest and most active houses in the chart, which gives you a really good grip or really good control over the outcome of what you're trying to achieve. And so with the ascendant ruler being the sun, the sun gives us visibility because it shines light on things. It enables us to see things clearly. It enables us to get attention, to perform, to have willpower to achieve things. And the 10th house can be to do with our superiors as well. So it could be to do with getting good visibility with your boss, with your superiors, or just in your public sphere in general. And I would say, this chart, the general conditions are all around pretty good. So it's a good purpose chart for whatever you want to start, really. And we have, the only thing I would avoid using this chart for would be, 9th house activities like publishing or applying to university, because Mars and Saturn are both there in the 9th house. And, I'd maybe avoid topics that the malefics rule, such as like 4th house, real estate, which is ruled by Mars, and then, 6th and 7th house topics, such as, health procedures, pets, marriage, and things like that. But the other topics of the chart are all pretty good. And so now with this chart, we have Venus in the 11th house in Gemini. And we also have Jupiter in the 12th house, which is in very close sextile with the sun now. And although it is in the 12th, that close aspect with the sun makes it more active, and it's really supporting the sun from behind the scenes there in its location. And the moon is angular in the 7th house, closely trine to Venus in the 11th. And as with previous charts, it's separating from Mercury and applying to Venus. And you could use this chart to start a business. The rising sign, which is you, and then your public reputation, and then the 7th house, which is like your clients, and then the two financial houses, the 2nd and the 8th, all have good things going on, as well as like Venus in the 11th, which can be like followers, fans, or patrons of your business. These all point towards a good time to start a new venture, start a business. And Leo rising here, the ruler of the 2nd and 8th houses, which have to do with finances, are again Mercury and Jupiter in a nice whole sign sextile to one another. So that's really nice, and you could use this for purchases, earnings, and investments as well. All right, so that was our last and best chart of next week, and I'll be back again next time with more electional charts, and the conditions, the astrological weather should continue to improve throughout this month. If you would like a personalized election for something important you need to do this year, such as apply for a job, start a business, get married, time to buy a property, have a child, apply to school, anything important that you need to do and you'd like to leverage astrological techniques to help your venture be successful, then you can check out my website mirabelleturner.com, and there I offer personalized electional astrology readings where you give me the times that you're working with, and I'll pick out at least 2 tailored electional charts that fit your birth chart personally, So it'll be the best times for you to use, and I will walk through those charts with you in a personalized one-on-one reading. So if that's something that you would be interested in, check out my website and make a booking with me. All right, that's all for this week. See you guys next time.